The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 teachers in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with the Tennessee academic standards. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu. This video is aligned with the following Tennessee academic standards.
So what we're going to do for the next little bit is look at the Library of Congress site. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about the teachers page and some of the education resources, but I want to spend the bulk of our time talking about ways that you and your students can use this to find primary sources for either History Day projects or for other research projects that you might be working on. So if you would, please go to the Library of Congress website, loc.gov, and you guys should see this. Now, I mentioned that the library has been doing a lot of work to update its site in recent years, and so they've modified the homepage, I think 3 times in the last 3 years. The most current version now is designed to be more mobile device friendly, which is why it's formatted this way. But all the material that you were used to finding at the other versions, if you've used it before, is still there. It's just maybe in a different spot. So when you're looking at it, the top section here is kind of like the new stuff that's available online, news releases, kind of the newest things they want to feature. There is, right under that top image, some key links that should be familiar to you, so like the library catalog, digital collections, there's a link for teachers right there. Congress.gov, which if you are teaching U.S. government, can be a great resource. They have this new trending section, which will give you links to a lot of different cool things that they've got going on, and usually connected to something that's been, been talked about recently in current events. And then there's a section here if you're visiting, information you might want to look at, including information about their exhibits, which, remember, if there's a physical exhibit at the library, there's an online version as well that lives on past when that exhibit is actually up at the library. So definitely want to remember where this exhibit section is at, and then if you click on that More Exhibitions, that gets you to all of them. And then at the very bottom, there is kind of a little mini primary source set. They take a collection and they pick out a cool batch of images to show you. They've been changing this out about once a month, and usually in line with either a seasonal event that's going on, or back in January they had one for inaugurations. They had baseball players up. They had jazz musicians for a little while. So this kind of changes out periodically, but it's kind of cool. Shows you some different things in the collection. All right. So for you as the teacher, the best place to quickly get to information is if you will look up here at the top left under those 3 lines and click on that education tab. That will get you to the best things designed for teachers and students. So you will see on the left side some tools that your kids could use, so like read.gov or Poetry 180. Science Everyday Mysteries, so these are some really cool features. For those of you who are teaching reading and language arts, under read.gov, you click on that and you look under the left-hand side under resources. There is a tab called Classic Books. And these are really neat. There's about 60 in total, but these are classic editions of different books that are available for you to actually read online in totality. So some really cool selections that are here. So for example, they have The Adventures of Huck Finn. So you can click on that one and you see, you get to the entire book.
So anything that's public domain, you can actually...
Well, they just have a small selection on here. There is, if there are books though that are in public domain, you can probably find them online that you can download them for free, either through there's an online archive that they actually have material in, or like Google Books. So as you look through this list, you will see the books that they have that are formatted this way, and they're classic editions. So like, for example, Cinderella, if you look at it, the story is going to be a little different than probably the versions that your students are familiar with, which is really cool for thinking about doing some compare and contrast, thinking about how the story's changed, why it's changed. Again, you can do some really cool activities with these. And then, of course, they have these great classic illustrations in them. So that is one really neat resource that's there. Read.gov has some other things that you might want to look at and explore on their site, but the classic books are my favorite thing on that section. All right. So going back to that education page, you will also see on there America's Library. So if you're working with middle school students, elementary and middle school students, this is the best feature the Library of Congress has designed specifically for their use. This page will give you different kind of American history stories done in bite-sized formats for students in that age group. So you can do like Meet Amazing Americans, for example, and you see they have these different categories. So if we were to do writers, for example, and we were to click on Langston Hughes, you get a little bio about him. And then you get these little stories that are about him. And so again, you'll see they're bite-sized. Every page has, on the left-hand side, some sort of primary source image that you can look at and could use with your students. So that America's Story, again, best resource designed specifically for elementary and middle school students. For your high school students, Today in History is going to be the best thing for them. And this, of course, every day, they talk about something that happened in American history that day. So today's is about Brigham Young and the group who, of course, were the founders for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so you'll get a little bit of information about kind of what happened. You'll see that there are different links in here to different materials. So this might take us to, for example, an image of Joseph Smith. You will see that there are, we've got a bird's eye view map, some panoramic images, and then at the end of it, you'll have this Learn More section. So it'll give you kind of tips for how to dig into the digital collections to find out more things related to whatever that day's event was. Now, for some days, they have more than one. So, for example, yesterday there was two, including one about the ice cream cone. And this one, you'll see that there's also a text. Like we've got a little quote from a primary source text. So, that's something that's kind of cool. So here we have Thomas Jefferson's recipe for vanilla ice cream. So again, it's a really cool feature, and it's really neat sometimes what you can find here linked to it. So your kids might enjoy playing with that feature. Now, for you as the teacher, on that education page, you have this right-hand column that has all of the best stuff for you. So you'll see at the top, they do have a teaching blog. And again, this is something they update. Usually a couple times a week, they have new entries on here. And so what we can see with these is sometimes they talk about kind of strategies for using primary sources in the classroom. Sometimes they are highlighting specific sources or thinking about skills that you could be teaching using primary sources. But with each of them, again, you'll see that there are lots of things that are hyperlinked that you can get to. And of course, you can't always go back and look at past entries. So like they've got indexed up here World War I. So here's one about a film series that explores the European view of the conflict. And so this blog article talks about those resources and how you might use them. So that blog can be a very helpful teaching tool. And if for nothing else, I like that they feature different sources. And so again, it's a good way to kind of quickly get to some things that you might not have found on your own. Now, under that next section, all of these things link directly to things on the teacher's page. And so if we were to click on teacher resources, that actually takes us to the teacher's homepage, which the web address for that is loc.gov/teachers. On that page, you will find, of course, that you can search things by standards. You do see this kind of featured classroom materials box, a link back to the blog, and then professional development and other resources here. Now, what I find to be most useful on this page are the classroom materials. So if you click on that link, you'll see the categories of what they have. You can quickly scan through these by clicking on themed resources that's located right here. And then you'll see that listing for what they have. And again, a lot of the stuff on the teacher's page does weigh more heavily towards U.S. history. There are a few world history things, but it is more U.S. history weighted. They have been actually trying to build in more things that are cross-curricular though. So you're seeing more science-related things, more things that are related to English and the arts. So you'll note that as you kind of scan through this section too. Themed resources, yes. Yeah, if you click on classroom materials, yeah, and then themed resources. And then with any of these, when you click on the subject, it'll show you the different categories, and then you could go through and look at them individually. Now, within the different types of materials they create, I like the primary source sets best. And again, like what we've done, they have tried to kind of curate a small selection of sources that could be used in the classroom. And with these, the thing that's really awesome is they've also got them formatted as PDF files, so they're already kind of formatted for you to print out. So that is really very, very helpful. And you'll note that they also have tried to make sure that they've got a pretty good mix. They've got some maps, they've got some illustrations, and then of course lots of different text since we're talking about the Constitution. Now, occasionally you'll find things like this that are handwritten that aren't transcribed, and I'm going to show you guys when we get into searching the digital collections what to look for transcriptions, because sometimes the library has transcriptions for text items, sometimes they don't. So that's kind of luck of the draw as far as whether what you're finding will actually have them. And typically, with a lot of what they feature on the primary source sets page, they usually have to, but they don't on the two that I've selected. So again, good place to start looking for sources that you could use with your students. Now you'll also see, of course, they do have lesson plans. They do link back to the exhibits and other kind of special presentations. They do link specifically to digital collections for those topics. And a lot of these collections will also have teaching resources. So if you were to click on Collection Connections, and then click on one of them that says Summary and Teaching Resources out to the side of it, what these sections do is essentially give you ideas for how you can use specific items within that collection to teach these different kind of skills. So under history, for example, they break it down into kind of different moments in Lincoln's life. So if we were teaching the Emancipation Proclamation, it kind of gives us some secondary source information, so some context. It links us to a specific source in this collection, and then it gives us some guiding questions that we could use. So again, just kind of giving you some ideas about how you might use the collections. So that teacher's page, the classroom materials section, you see has a lot of different resources. And you can specifically just search the teacher's page by using that search box that you'll see there on the left. That just searches the teacher's page. So that can be a way to approach that. Again, a lot of good stuff, but I really want to spend some time talking to you guys about the digital collection. So if you go back to the home page, Now you will see at the top that there is a search box, and the library has done a wonderful job of improving their search features, and so that you can put in your search terms on the homepage in that search box, and really this is the best way to enter into the digital collections. So if we were to, we'll stick with Andrew Jackson. So if I put Andrew Jackson into my search box, you'll see that I have over 26,000 items that pop up. Now, that's entirely too much for you to probably get through. It's entirely more than your students are going to want to care to look through. So how do we start to make sense of all of this stuff? And the best way to do that is to use the toolboxes that are here on the left-hand side. And in particular, I will say that I use the original format section and the date section as my two ways to kind of quickly scan through what's here. So let's start with thinking, so if I am doing a project on Jackson, and maybe I need first to find some images of Jackson. So I can click on Photos, Prints, and Drawings here, and I see there are 439, so it's going to pull those 439 items out of my 26,000. Now, the Library of Congress does not own copyright on the materials in its collection. And where this really matters, and where this is going to actually impact you and your students in using the collections, is in images. So if there are images in the Prints and Photographs online catalog that are copyright protected, or in collections that have copyright protection, or that there's uncertain about who owns the copyright, then sometimes you can't view those items online. And you want to essentially filter those out because it's really frustrating to find them, and you see the teeny tiny little thumbnail that you can see that it looks like something cool, but you can't do anything with it. So let's just take them out. And the way to do that is if you go to the very bottom here on the left, you'll see Access Condition. And we have two choices. We have available online or available at the Library of Congress campus. Now, if we were in DC, in the Jefferson building for example, we could see those 46 items. But being here at Austin Peay, we can't see them. So we're going to click on Available Online, and it's going to filter out all those others so that we don't have to worry about running across those in our search. Now I still have 392 items. So that's still, quite a few to scan through. So what I want to do now is think about changing how I'm looking at my search results. So you see over here, you see it says View. And we can actually change how we're going to view our search results. So I can click on Grid, and that's actually going to break it down and show me 100 thumbnails at a time. So that what I can do is, in less than 5 minutes, scroll through all 392 items and figure out what are the best images that I might want to use. So maybe I think this one's kind of cool. So I could click on that one. I can find its bibliographic page. So I can find out, its title, who was the contributor, when was it published. I can also download a copy. So I can get a GIF file, a JPEG, or a TIFF. For most things, JPEG files are going to work just fine for your purposes. But you can see, I can I can quickly get through this, and in probably less than 5 minutes, I could have looked at all 392 items. And I really like using Grid for photographs. It doesn't work so well for other types of items, but for photographs, that's a really good way to attack looking at your search results list. All right, so let's take out all of those ways that we've narrowed our results. You can click on those little X's, and that'll take it back to our original search results with our 26,000 items. All right, we're going to go back to List. View, so that we get back to looking at this. Now, the way they do their search now, the most relevant things will pop up towards the top. So you see, of course, we see at the beginning, it lists out the Andrew Jackson papers, but then we see these web pages that are listed. Now, these are actually web guides that the Library of Congress has put together, and I really like these, again, for quickly getting at some of the best sources related to an item. And they typically have web guides for like presidents or important pieces of legislation or amendments, that kind of thing. So, for example, if we click on the Indian Removal Act, we see this web guide gives us a little paragraph about what it was. It lists out the digital collections, and it links us. So the first collection it mentions is A Century of Lawmaking. This is essentially congressional records. Now, it can make for some pretty dry reading. Your middle schoolers may not be fascinated by it, but it can, you can get to, some things that are pretty worthwhile in these things. But we can look at how this was debated in Congress. And so we can look at, this was the debates that day where it summarizes what it was in the congressional records.
This would be great for teachers that take their kids to Youth Ledge.
Yeah.
It's a good resource.
Yeah, Congress.gov is too, because it's all the current legislation and the entire actually legislative process. So from the minute a bill is introduced to committee to, every stop along the way. So you can look through these and see, we get down to the Jackson papers and we see some of Jackson's correspondence here. So here we have a letter to the Chickasaw Chiefs on August 23rd, 1830. And you see it pulls up that letter. Now, again, as I mentioned, not everything has a transcription, and this one unfortunately does not. So this would require,
Understanding how to works.
Yeah, understanding cursive and taking the time to actually try to read that. And so for some of your students, that may be asking a bit much. So keep that in mind as you're looking at these. Sometimes you have transcriptions, sometimes you don't.
I got a little bit lost. I got back to home, I took all my X's off, and I'm like, how did you get to that?
All right, are you looking at this?
Yes.
All right, I
I
clicked.
just missed that one.
Yeah,
The
right.
Indian removal.
Yeah.
Thank you, I'm so sorry.
That's all right. So the web guides, again, will link you to a lot of specific primary sources and can be a really good resource, again, for quickly getting at stuff. So I would definitely, want to take a look at those if you see those pop up in your search results. I want to find one that actually shows a transcript so you guys know what that looks like. So I'm going to narrow it down and just pull out the manuscripts and mixed materials. Essentially, that means all the text stuff. So what you hope to find is right above the box where it says download, you'll see it says text, PDF, or XML. Now, that is where you actually have transcriptions for these items. And so when you click on that, you see that it actually has that item in something that your students can read. Now, the other thing that I will tell you is a really helpful thing to think about in using these, because sometimes, these can be quite long. So this one's just 4 pages, but, you could find things that are 200 or 300 pages. And most of the time your kids aren't going to read all that. They're not going to scan all that. So what you can do, though, if you're using Google Chrome, you can do a find on these pages in a PDF, and then you can put in a keyword search, and it will show you everywhere that appears in your document. And so again, you can kind of quickly figure out if there's something of use for you in that document. So keep that in mind, and again, what you want to look for when you're looking at a text to see if it has this right here.
So if these documents were on standardized testing, they would be in print form like you just showed us.
Yeah. So, yeah, because I mean, that's what your kids are going to see. They're not going to...
We don't want them having to read cursive.
Yeah, they're not going to, get that page.
No.
So again, using that search results and then using the left-hand toolboxes is a good way to kind of quickly scan through what you've got. And you should be able to, manage a search result so that you're spending maybe, 15, 20, 30 minutes as opposed to hours and days, going through a search results. Now, I will say that it is very helpful as your kids are searching in these kind of databases to teach them to take good research notes. So have them make a list of search terms that they want to search for. So think about key people, key places, key legislation, like is there a key event, like what are those key terms that are going to help them to figure out, find the sources that they're looking for. Also have them, when they find something, save the full title for that item so that they can go back and find it again. Have them, again, make notes, like I found, this document and it talked about these 3 things that I want to come back and use it again. So having those kind of notes will help them as they're going through the research process to better use the sources and to identify where, what they're finding and how it connects to other things. So most things within the digital collection search from the home page. But like with everything, there's always one exception to the rule. And that, unfortunately, is probably my favorite collection. And so that is Chronicling America, the Historic American Newspapers. So if you go back to the home page, so if you're back here, and you click on Digital Collections, right there under the first image. And of course, this gives you a listing of all of the collections the library has, but you'll see under Featured Content, Chronicling America, Historic American Newspapers. Now, this is an ongoing project that the library has been doing in partnership and partially funded through the National Endowment for the Humanities. And we currently have over 12 million newspaper pages that have been digitized. The date range on this is 1789 to 1924, and there is a pretty good representation for papers across the country. Tennessee is actually very fortunate in that we have about 120-something papers that have had portions of them digitized. So again, if you're doing local history projects and your topic falls in the state range, this can be a treasure trove of material. You can, of course, do a basic search that you'll see here. You can use this bar right here. You can do an advanced search, and that's actually typically how I use this, is do the advanced search feature, where you can narrow it down by state or specific paper. I specifically like this because you can narrow it by year or specific dates. And then you can do different things with your search terms. So you can do any words, all words, phrases, or words within a space of each other. All right, so I'm going to narrow my search down to, I'm going to do 1814 to 1836. And I'm going to do the phrase Andrew Jackson. And so what it will do is actually on every page that your search term shows up, it will highlight in red where it's at on that page. So what you can do is actually open that page, and then I can scroll in and quickly figure out if that article is something that is going to be of use to me or not. So you're not having to scan the whole page and figure out why it popped that page up for you. It's going to, again, highlight on the page what you want to look at. So once you find a newspaper page or a newspaper article that you want to use, they do have the feature over here at the top of that view box where you'll see a little perforated box with a pair of scissors. And what you can do, see it right there? What you can do is click on that, and it will actually clip out what you're seeing in that view box. So you'll get that image that then I could print that out, I could save that image, whatever I wanted to do with it. Now something that I
make a cut, did you highlight?
No, I just, whatever is in this box right here, when I click on this right here, it's going to cut that out. Yeah. Now I think this paper is really cool because, of course, we see the article over here on the left in English, but then we see the Cherokee language printed there. That's pretty cool. So again, the newspaper collection is there. That is one way to do kind of a general search through it. But in all honesty, you're probably not going to have time to spend tons of your own time searching for just the perfect article to use for, an activity. So what they have on here that could be helpful for you, and if you click, if you go to the very top up here and you see where it says Chronicling America, if you click on that, it'll take us back to the kind of home page for the collection. So when you get back there on the left, you're going to see this recommended topics. So if you click on recommended topics, and then we're going to do alphabetical list. And I'm going to choose the Chinese Exclusion Act. You can pick whichever. So what it does is for all of those events, they have these pages. So we'll have a little timeline, kind of important dates for whatever the event is. Some suggested search strategies. So if I wanted to search for my own article, this is a way that I might do it. But then the really cool thing about it is they have all of these sample articles that are already pulled for the topic. And typically with these, they do a really good job of picking papers from across the country. So you're going to get lots of different perspectives, based on geography. And what we'll see then, of course, when we click on one, is that it will highlight, that article. So again, I'm not having to spend tons of time to figure out where it's at. That's the article that it was highlighting. Now, as you're looking at these, some papers were in better condition when they were digitized than others. This one's pretty legible, but there are some papers where the ink has faded out, or the typeface, there isn't a lot of space between them. And so you'll look at some that even being able to zoom in, they can still be a little difficult to read. So know that you might run into that, but that's just the reality of the condition the papers were in, when they were digitized. Either that's how they were microfished, or if they were actually using the original paper, that's what that paper actually looked like. So keep that in mind. But for the most part, these are very, very legible, and they're a wonderful resource to use with your kids. All right, so questions about the newspaper collection?
Just a comment. Yeah. For those of you who teach U.S. history in high school, you got to teach the yellow fever epidemic in Memphis. Last, I guess it's 2 years ago, I went through, and you can almost do a near real time, if you want to call it that, from back then. But in these newspapers, they have some great resources from Memphis, so you can track down the articles of the day that dealt with the very day that the epidemic hit Memphis and the results of that. And so it's really interesting. Students actually, and I taught in an alternative school, so sometimes they can be really difficult to get interested in stuff like this, but they actually enjoyed looking at the newspapers.
Yeah, and as you teach that, because the newspapers are a wonderful resource for teaching yellow fever. This lesson plan that we have on the rebuilding of the city has some of those articles, but then it has all of the ones after that where they're talking about surrendering the city charter and like all of the things that are being done in the aftermath of the yellow fever. So there's a bunch of different newspaper articles that are here. So so wonderful for teaching that topic.
And I would say English teachers right now are being asked to do a lot of pairing of fiction with nonfiction. What a great resource to quickly go in and pull.
Yeah.
That makes me excited.
Again, when you're at the home page or wherever you can see this box, you'll see there's a tab that says all digitized newspapers. You can go in here and we can look up all of the Tennessee papers. So again, if you're doing a Tennessee specific topic or project, you'll see the 125 papers that are listed. You will see, of course, it'll tell you where those things were published. It'll tell you how many issues have been digitized, and then it'll tell you the date range for what's up and available. The committee that put these together did so trying to be sure that we were representing a large section of the state. So it's a good mix of urban and rural, of east, middle, and west. And so, again, wonderful list. I think I'm very proud of what Tennessee did here and being able to represent all of the state. And so you see here, we've got all of these different Clarksville papers. So you see, for example, there's 5 issues of the Clarksville Evening Tobacco Leaf. And with any of these, you click on the title for that newspaper, and you'll get this bibliographic page for the newspaper that'll give you information about, its title, if there were alternative titles, place of publication, what its geographic range was, how frequently it was published. And then you get this wonderful, paragraph here that will talk about the history of that paper. So it'll tell you who was the publisher. Oftentimes it will tell you, like, was that publisher a Democrat or Republican? What was the editorial slant for that paper? And so these can be, again, a wonderful resource for thinking about teaching media literacy. And in fact, we have a newsletter lesson idea that we did just a couple months ago on evaluating newspapers that pulls in this as kind of an activity and thinking about how you could pull a couple different articles, have your kids read it, examine the articles, and then come back and read this and have them examine how that becomes evident based on the content of the articles and the events that they were talking about. So again, just a wonderful resource. Yes, sir?
2 more things, and maybe even 3 more things. Another thing is that in U.S. history you have to talk about marketing in the 1920s. This shows you a really good, what's the word I'm looking for, metamorphosis of advertising from the late 1700s through the 1800s into the 1900s, how advertising changed. Another thing is it offers you, as she was mentioning, tells you the political slant, but because there are so many newspapers in different languages and from different political slants, you can really get a sense of how different groups saw political events or just any event. And lately in the local news, or not local news, but national news, you hear a lot about fake news. And if you're politically or historically ignorant, then you believe that fake news is something new, whereas those of us who know something about history realize that fake news has been around for a long time. And I believe in the website, if we go to let's see, there's an article in there about Americans buy the North Pole. It's from the Evening World, January 17th, 1890, and the headline on it is Americans buy the North Pole, they change the axis of the Earth, Arctic regions bloom like the tropics by the explosion of a stupendous cannon. And so, it's a really good source to find these kind of articles, kind of like I guess you could say the National Enquirer, but you'll find those kind of articles in here as well. So you can show students that this is not something new. This is something that's been happening for decades. Fake news.
You say you're from Chestnut Mountain?
Yes.
Carthage Courier, today's date, 1915.
Yeah, I might have advocated that one get added.
This is hilarious.
Yeah.
Recent rains are sending corn and tobacco to the boom. This coupled with harvesting is moving farmers with maximum capacity. The merry hum of the harvester is heard on the distant hillsides reaping with golden grain.
Yeah. So again, wonderful things. And what I love about using newspapers, especially if you can find papers that are from either specifically your community or a neighboring community, is to show students how people in their area were experiencing these events that they're reading about in their history books. And again, it makes it personal. Just like today, we all have viewpoints about things that are going on, and so did people back then about what was going on around them. And those newspapers can give us a way of getting at what those viewpoints were, can get at their responses. And so again, it's why I think this collection is a really great one to use with students. All right, questions about the newspapers? So that is the best places to start. Of course, as you get in here and get to digging, the library has more than you could ever hope to look at. I mean, I've been doing this program for 8 years. I'm still finding new stuff all the time. I invite you to get in here and to dig into the website and figure out what is going to work well for you. Have your kids work on it. I mean, if they're doing History Day projects, you can't do a successful history project if you have not visited the Library of Congress at least once. It's impossible. So take a look at it. And also keep in mind that as you're working, myself and my colleague, Dr. Stacey Graham, are happy to serve as a resource for you. So if you have questions, you're looking for something you can't find, feel free to reach out to us, email us, call us. And we'll be happy to help you, find what it is that you're looking for. Or if the library doesn't have it, we'll try to help you. We'll direct you to a place that might have that material. So we're always happy to help.